let's take a look at family and bioecological theory. In this final session of week 1, we will delve into the heart of our course focus, which is family engagement. We will review Bronfenbrenner's bioecological theory and highlight definitions and models of family engagement from the education profession. Families are not unitary, nor can they be narrowly defined. Within the heart, mind, and experience of each individual, family is personal. Our families help to define who we are and who we are not, how we view the world, how we live, and how we share our lives with others. Think about this quote. Consider these questions. How does this quote relate to your current or future work with families? How does it fit with your definition for family? Let's review Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory of development. It is important and relevant for this course, so we will take some time to make sure that we understand this theory of development. Yuri Bronfenbrenner recognized that children develop within the context of their environments and that interactions between the child and the environment are bidirectional. That is, children's actions in their environments and the environments shape children. Individuals do not live in isolation, but instead in a broad system of intimate relationships with family, school, community, and society. The bioecological model provides a theory to explain, process interactions with a person, parent, such as a parent, an object, such as toys, books, manipulatives. Those are bidirectional. A core premise in this theory is that direct experiences, called proximal processes, are the main mechanisms through which learning and development occur. So these direct experiences. For the person, we think about individual characteristics that might influence interactions, such as temperament, attitude, personality. For context, we think about experiences and characteristics in the environment that affect how a person grows and develops in 4 nested systems, which are the microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, and macrosystem. Development is continuous, so that is how time is represented in the model. For our course, we'll primarily be focused on context and its relationship to child development. It is both a theoretical and practical framework to understand how interactions, which are the processes, and how individual characteristics of each person, and how time and the context, which are various environments, intersect and influence development. Bronfenbrenner's theory indicates that proximal processes, those direct experiences between individuals and objects, or individuals and individuals, are bidirectional. Here we show an example of a proximal process, bidirectional interaction between a teacher and a child, but we could substitute an object such as Legos for the teacher, or a parent for the individual. More specifically, these are the reciprocal interactions over time between developing individuals and their environment, which becomes progressively more complex. For development, these proximal processes must be increasingly more complex. Proximal processes also vary by characteristics of the person and characteristics of the context. What's key for us to understand is that if we're less familiar with Bronfenbrenner's theory, it's just understanding that these bidirectional interactions drive development. So when we think about teacher-child interactions, child-child, parent-child, object-child. Another component of the bioecological model is context. Context can be broken down into 4 levels. Bronfenbrenner situates the child as center of gravity in the universe of all of these systems. That would be an analogy. So here we see the child is at the center, and then the microsystem is the immediate level that the child lives within. The mesosystem is the next level, the exosystem is the next level, and macrosystem is the farthest level out. We will take a look at what types of influences fall within each of these systems. All levels of context are also biodirectional, so that means there's interactions happening at each of the systems. This model represents the child being nested in multiple contexts. The microsystem is the innermost level of the environment. This is the context in which the child spends a good deal of time engaging in activities and interactions. So we can think about home and school as those two pivotal and initial microsystems that have a direct effect on the child. Parents are children's first teachers. Parents teach children about the world and are a major source of socialization. Two examples of areas where parents influence development as a child's first teacher are language and emotional regulation. Families teach language even when they do not realize it. The amount of conversation in the home is directly linked to the children's language ability growth. Studies comparing families from different socioeconomic status levels show that high-income families often ask more questions of their children, talk more in a greater range of topics, and use more varied language and vocabulary in the home. Likewise, families also teach children about how to regulate emotions, such as what to do when you're angry, sad, or moody. Families teach children what is acceptable behavior for their culture. For example, in Hispanic, Asian, and Native American cultures, an emphasis is placed on responsibility for the family's well-being, and children are taught to behave in accordance with this. Families act as a system. Interactions within the system, Bronfenbrenner coined these as proximal processes, influence the persons in the system. A behavioral change by one person often influences a behavioral change in another. For the mesosystem, we want to think about that since children spend time in more than one microsystem, the relationships among elements in the microsystem are also important. For example, parent-child interactions in the microsystem will affect educator-parent interactions in the mesosystem. Interactions between the elements of the microsystem build upon the mesosystem. The exosystem. There are also important contexts in children's lives that have important indirect influences on their development. For example, the flexibility of a parent's work schedule and workplace will determine the pay, the time off, the sick leave, the maternity and paternity leave, all which indirectly affect the child. Environments where the child is not physically present also play a role in development. The macrosystem. This is the outermost level of the bioecological model and contains the broad beliefs and attitudes of the larger society or group. These broad beliefs and attitudes still affect children. For example, different countries have different views about the quality of child care, and these views are expressed in the form of policies and programs, and they determine what type of care young children will receive. Note that these ideals may not be common to all society, but affect a child growing up in that particular society. Children have outside contexts that shape their interactions, such as beliefs about parenting. These outside contexts encompass and affect the other three contexts and thus child development. It is important to remember that a child develops in the environment that includes many contexts, which are proximal processes, individuals, and all that is happening with time. So time is known as the chronosystem, and time is that throughout time periods, different influences occur. For example, we're living in a pandemic right now, and so that would be at a point in time, what types of influences does the chronosystem have on these other systems? Time within a specific interaction is thinking of microtime. Mesotime is when we think about consistency of interactions, and macrotime, we think about historical events. That was very much like my analogy of what's happening right now with our pandemic. Another example would be the developmental processes may differ for children who were 10 years old in 2011 versus children who were 10 years old during the events of 2001 on September 11. So children that were born at the time of the Trade Center bombing, and then children that were already developing. We see how historic events have a trickle-down impact on child development. The most important influential context on child development is the microsystem. This includes the child's family. So we want to think about the focus of the family context. Throughout this course, we will integrate information regarding Bronfenbrenner's theory as we think about the influence on child and family development. Time's influence, such as historical events, can also be complex, diverse, and informed by the context.